In this video, I'll show you a 5-step scoring method that will gamify your habits. 99% of people who ever try tracking their habits only do step number 1. But if you go all the way to step 5, you're going to unlock a level of consistency that will feel like a game changer. You're going to be miles away from any generic tracker you have ever tried. And also by the end of this video, you're going to have one metric to be able to instantly tell whether you've had a good day or not. Let's dive in. So we're here in my daily cycle, which is the core execution engine of the entire fundamental mastery system. And I'm just going to scroll down all the way to the review section. So this is the day I'm having right now. But if we go to the review section, I think this is where we're going to be able to clearly see all the points. So for this video, I'm going to assume you already know the routines and habits you want to be tracking. I'm not going to go into that. You can see I have a bunch of them here, but instead I'm just going to jump right into the step number 1. The first step, once you know your routines, is really the level of a typical habit tracker that you're going to see around, but we're still going to add a little bit of extra twist to it to make it cooler. In this first step, you really take your routines that you maybe written down somewhere or you have them in your head, and you convert them to checkboxes. So for example, we are here in my daily cycle and you can see a bunch of examples of routines and habits that I want to be executing. I want to do my deep work. I want to do food prep in the evening. I want to do a couple of movement sessions. I want to shut down my work before 8 o'clock in the evening, etc., etc. Now, this can be a giant mess, and I've seen it happen where you just see a wall of check boxes and there is very little structure to it. And also, there are some routines that are not daily that you don't even know where to add. So, we're going to improve on that whole idea in 2 ways. First way of improving on that is you add those checkboxes on an appropriate time frame. So this is my daily cycle and these are daily routines. And if you have weekly routines, then they are going to exist in a completely separate place in your week. So if we go to this is my today, and if we go to just to this week, you can see it also has a bunch of checkboxes, but they have no representation in my day. They only exist in the weeks. And I also have months and quarters and years and even other cycles in the system. And those are completely independent. And I don't want to see them when I'm executing, my daily routines. When I look at my daily cycle, these are exactly the routines that I'm interested in. And the second way we're going to improve on the wall of checkboxes that you can see in other habit trackers is that we're going to break them down by domain of life. So instead of seeing all your habits that you want to perform in a huge list, you can see that they are broken down by domain, like recovery, clarity, nutrition, fitness, life admin, etc. This is going to help a lot when we go into the further steps of the scoring system. So this is your first step and it's a small one, but on the other hand, it's very important. So make sure you complete it. You map your routines to checkboxes on an appropriate time cycle, and then you group them by domain of life. This takes us to step number 2. And if we want to have a scoring system and especially build something that gamifies our performance, then we clearly want to score our performance based on the routines that we executed. Now, the trick is routines can have a very varying level of importance in our lives. We can take a very naive approach when it comes to scoring our routines, and you've probably seen it in other habit trackers. This is when you have, let's say, 10 routines that you want to perform each day, and checking one off just automatically gives you 10% of the completion rate. But this really doesn't account for the fact that routines are not created equal. This is what I call flat tracking. To fix this problem and have a more sophisticated and nuanced way of scoring our routines, I would suggest 2 possible ways. One method, and the one I would recommend, is to convert your checkbox to a specific individual score via a formula in Notion when you are adding it up. So just to show you an example, if we go to, let's say, clarity points, you can see I have this formula that adds up my clarity points, and each individual checkbox is converted to a different number of points. So, for example, me following my routine of being creative before reactive got 23 points, while let's say taking a midday rest only gets 5. And then, of course, they're all summed up. But the specific point is that you can have control over how many points each routine gets. Now, this method is simple. I would definitely recommend you implement it if you can, and you can almost always convert a habit, a routine that you want to follow into a checkbox, and thus you can actually use this method. Even if it's something that you want to do multiple times per day, what you can do is have a target. I want to do this, let's say, 5 times per day. And then simply at the end of the day, ask, well, have I done that or not? And then check the checkbox. The other method is a little more involved. And let me just scroll down. And this is basically you creating separate actions that are linked to your routines, and then that action gets a specific number of points. Let me just show you this on an example of my fitness tracking. So let's just click on something like hamstring stretches. You can see that this is an action, it's linked to a routine, and then it has a specific amount of reward points that you get. And then you can also adjust that based on the quantity that you did, etc., etc. Now, it's quite advanced, it's really flexible, and it's great if you want to be performing many different types of habits, like in this case, it's exercises. And then you also don't want to be polluting your cycles with way too many checkboxes. And another case is where it's a cumulative habit where you want to hit a specific number of repetitions, but if it comes just to the end of the day, you can't really be remembering, oh, did I do that 20 times or 25 times? This is, I would say, quite advanced. I urge people to just start with having simple checkboxes. Like, for example, if you want to work out twice per day, just have a basic checkbox as I have here: movement AM, movement PM. This is already a great start, but if this is very important to you, this is not going to be enough. You want to be tracking more. And if this is what you want, then there is a way of doing that, a way of converting each of those individual habits, like push ups and wrist curls and whatever, in my case, I did today. You can definitely be converting each of the executions to a specific number of points. And then, of course, once you are calculating your formula for the overall points, you can be adding those up. Also, a pro tip: if you want to be doing either of the methods, you want to be very careful so that you have a way of adjusting those number of points without affecting your entire history of the habit execution. So what I mean by that, if, for example, if you built in the number of points for each habits into a formula, and then you've already been executing that for, let's say, 100 days, if you then adjust the formula, by default, that's going to affect all the 100 days that you've been executing the habit. Same goes for the second method as well. So do make sure that whatever method that you're following, you have a way of adjusting the number of points for each habit without affecting the past. So that is that. I would urge you to be more intentional with your scoring and avoid flat tracking. Not all habits matter equally. Scoring forces you to ask what actually drives your life. And this is great because then you can award more points to that. And this is our step number 2. Once you have your routines and checkboxes, make sure you assign points to every habit that you have. So let's move on to the step number 3 in our scoring system. And the problem that we want to be tackling here is the fact that in a typical tracker, you don't see which domains of life you're really slacking on. What I mean is that you will probably see something like, well, you've completed 75% of the routines that you have scheduled for today. Okay, but that tells me nothing about, which domains of life I'm maybe crushing and which domains of life I'm really letting down and I'm really dropping the ball. So once we already have the scores associated with each routine and we also have them grouped, now you can see that we can easily aggregate the scores for each domain separately. You can have an aggregated score for the clarity domain of your life, for the life admin, for recovery, for nutrition, for movement, etc. So add this little bit of structure to your scoring. You want to start seeing patterns. Generic stats hide breakdowns. Without domain scores, you'll never see patterns. Only the average, and the average is a liar. With this added structure, for example, you'll notice that life doesn't fall apart all at once. You'll see like clockwork patterns of say overworking and under recovering for a couple of days, and then your work domain collapses as well. Like, who would have thought? Or you neglect your recovery, and then somehow your nutrition starts collapsing, and then you start slacking on your training, etc. Like, these are going to be very valuable insights. And also, you are definitely going to see the reverse patterns where, for example, when you crush the fundamentals of your life, like eating, sleeping, moving, then somehow you have an increased work capacity and you feel more fulfilled and happy. And another thing that this breakdown really helps with is higher level time frame reviews. So let's say weekly reviews or monthly reviews, because then you're going to be able to see at a glance where it is that you're dropping the ball. So this is our step number 3. Make sure you aggregate the points into domain specific scores. So let's move to step number 4, and let's get back to our typical habit tracker. And a typical habit tracker will show you that, let's say you've completed 80% of your routines. Now, this is actually quite different from this percentage that you're going to see here or here or here. This is not a percentage of the maximum number of possible points that you can ever get. No, no, no. This is a percentage of our target for this specific cycle. This matters a lot because you're not targeting perfection, you're targeting consistency. And let me show you how this works if I search for masterpiece day standards. So I have a separate linked database called Masterpiece Day Standards. And if we click, you can see that the entry that this specific day is linked to is it's an execution day. And it also has a date because you can evolve those targets. But if we click into it, you can see that in this separate database that I have linked, I have the areas that I'm tracking, and I have specific targets for each specific domain. This implementation of Masterpiece Day Standards can be a bit technical for some people, but if you think about it, it really unlocks a very cool set of features. One example is you can have one set of targets for your weekends and one set of targets for your weekdays. Now, this is really going to help you with flexibility. And another idea, you can definitely easily evolve targets over time, which would be a pain in other systems. One thing that, for example, I do when I help people implement this system into their lives is we implement it in 3 stages. So we start with the core routines, then we add some more, bump up the target, and then in the third stage, we'll already get to the point where the person is executing all the routines that they were looking to execute. By the way, if you want my help building such a system into your life, you can click the link in the description and we can just talk about it, see where you're at, what you're struggling with, and how maybe I can help. So, this is our step number 4. Let's just get back to our review section. In this step, you realize that most tracking systems punish you for being human. Without targets, you're just chasing 100%. And perfection is a terrible benchmark. Targets let your system reflect reality, not fantasy. Progress becomes sustainable and not brittle. So complete this step number 4 and make sure that you set targets per domain. And this brings us to step number 5, the final step. And by this point, we are already just miles away from 99% of people tracking their habits. But we can improve this even further. Now that we have scores specifically aggregated per domain of life, you can see here on the left, we have all these scores. But if we want to take the next step, then it would be really helpful if we combine all those scores for individual domains into an overall mastery score for the day. And this is what you can see here. So far, I have 355 points for the day, and it's still in progress. This way, you have one overall score for your entire day, reflecting your actual performance on the fundamentals of your life. This can sound gimmicky, but If done correctly, you will notice a very, very tight correlation between this overall score and how you actually feel and perform in reality. I would also recommend giving yourself an additional bonus when hitting your targets in all life domains. This is what I have implemented in my system. And this will further discourage you from just crushing it in some domains of life and completely neglecting the others. And if I just look for my mastery score, you can see in the formula, you can see how it's done here. So I have bonus points. And then if it's an all-rounder day, which the definition is I've hit my targets in all live domains, then I give myself an extra 50 points, which is not too trivial. So this has really completely changed how I think about performance. Now, for me, having a great day is kind of down to a formula. And again, you can mess this up and this would not work. But when it really clicks and you really pick the right routines and the right scoring, you will really notice that this score somehow just in one number really reflects the cumulative performance and success of your day. And another thing that having this single score helps you tremendously with is reviewing your performance on a higher level time frame. So think months or quarters, because then you can visualize each day just with one metric, and then you can color code it and do all kinds of cool visualizations. This is really powerful. Life isn't optimized by isolated wins. It's the sum of your domains. Tracking scattered habits creates a lot of noise. Mastery score just distills that signal. One number, one reflection, one glance to know how you actually lived that day. If you set this up right, it works really well. So, this is our step number 5 done. You aggregate all domains into an overall mastery score. And once you complete all the 5 steps, your motivation and consistency on these habits is just going to be on a whole different level. And this is not going to be the motivation that comes after, watching a David Goggins video. It's just going to be a clear realization that following a specific, very defined number of routines, you clearly affect your well being and performance. And you're going to very much see it. Now, this is of course great, but none of this tracking actually helps you perform these routines. If your routines are hard to execute and you only see progress at the end of the day, that's not really going to work. So, to make sure you can execute your habits consistently without friction, watch this video next.